everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Visual Command Center 3.0, presented by IDV Solutions. I'm Krista Bailey with IDV Solutions, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. We're going to start off today by hearing from Scott Sareki from IDV Solutions, and then George Spiegel will present the main part of our program today by providing a demonstration of the new features of Visual Command Center 3.0. So let's get started with hearing from Scott Sareki.
Thank you, Krista. Appreciate it. Good. So for those of you that are returning to what is another webinar in the continuing series of webinars that we at IDV Solutions are presenting, probably really important for us to understand that first of all, we're coming out with a new release of our application, and in doing so, there's a number of new features that are being extended upon Visual Command Center. So we're going to cover those today. It's also important to note that we'll be participating at ASIS next week. So for those of you that will be there next week, we'll hopefully get a chance to meet with you face-to-face. So as it relates to what we're presenting, the product from IDV Solutions called Visual Command Center fits into a relatively new space. The space is called PSRV or PSERV, and we're going to walk you through what is PSERV. So Physical Security and Risk Visualization is what the acronym PSERV stands for. The goal of the tool set is to provide the operators, the users, those people that can receive benefit from tools like this, potentially what might be the first preemptive, proactive technology solution to be enabled into the GSOC. Essentially, the goal of the tool set is to provide the organization as much preemptive and proactive view to things that could negatively impact the assets or those other things that the business cares about. So again, putting this in perspective with what you might be most familiar with, your technological systems like access control and video management, intrusion detection, and potentially your PSIM systems, those systems are typically providing you a view to things oftentimes inside the four walls, or let's say the four corners of the property of your facilities, and oftentimes giving you visibility to actions, to events that have already taken place, right? Door forced open, access denied, video motion detected going the wrong way, glass break sensor, and so forth. Certainly, well-needed tools inside the organization. But with a PSERV solution, you now have the ability to sit a little bit higher or above the infrastructure, essentially giving you that global map-based view to the places that you have things that you care about, and again, putting you in a preemptive position to understand, understand what's going on in that environment. So we talk about being preemptive from what we call a macro view in the domain to what might be called, a regional view in that domain, to potentially what you might look at as more of a micro-level view. The goal is to take a preemptive position, give you, again, visibility to those things that you care about that might be distributed across a large geography, whether it's a country, a continent, or the world, but also give the ability to start to drill into the rest of those assets or the rest of those resources as you need to get more specific, more pointed information about what you're dealing with. So we say start off with a preemptive tool, the visualization piece, which oftentimes can put you in a much different position. As the survey identified, for those of you that participated, oftentimes you're encumbered inside a GSOC dealing with macro-type risk events in a much more reactive way than you'd ideally like to be. Again, with a tool set like this, as we go into more detail, you'll understand how you can change that position of the GSOC and putting yourself into a more proactive role. So again, macro to regional to micro, a preemptive tool set enabling a proactive view. So, the concept is fairly simple. We're working to develop a platform that enables visualization to types of risk that are outside the parameters, the boundaries of typically what are inside those microsystems like access and intrusion and PSIM. We're giving you a macro view to risk events that can be large in scale, that can be somewhat catastrophic in scale, and it certainly can be preemptively notified before essentially things like weather, hurricanes, natural disasters, civil unrest, again, the whole list of bullets here, are actually impacting your business. The goal is if you can preempt a weather event, if you can identify the assets that could be affected by that weather event, and you can do so in a preemptive and timely manner, oftentimes you can change the end result of potentially the damages, the repercussions, the disruptions to business that those risk events might take. So again, you're looking at risk events in the orange circle, as identified here, even to some extended sources that IDV has been creating connections to. So we're now being able to leverage things like social media, like Twitter. We can leverage things like your travel management system. We can leverage things like physical security and SCADA infrastructure, where some of that risk information coming from those underlying systems can be preemptively visualized against those things in the blue circle, your assets. So those things that you care about, the things that you're trying to protect. Again, we're not looking at being inside the four walls of the building. We're looking at essentially the building. We're looking at the campus. We're looking at the different types of people that you care about. So your employees when they're at work, your employees potentially when they home office or their home locations. You're looking at travelers. So George will show you one of our new connections in this upcoming release version to International SOS, which gives us the ability to look at travelers in 3 different contexts. Visibility to patriots, expatriates, potentially visitors, other different descriptions you might have around personnel. These can be identified individually. Certainly your commercial real estate, so your buildings, your facilities, your locations, whatever might be part of sort of that concrete infrastructure that is fairly fixed and is located on the map, those are things that can be plotted across the globe from a visualization perspective. Even dealing with things that are more mobile, so transient assets. People that might be carrying a GPS or GMS device, vehicles, airplanes, so on and so forth that can be tagged with GPS devices and tracked real time. And even pushing out further into the value chain, things like the periphery things tied to your business's supply chain. So supplier locations, supply routes, critical transportation routes. These things can all be landed on a map in what we would call a geocoded context and alerted against when risk events encroach upon those. And then even dealing with things like temporary assets. So the ability to care about a location, maybe not today, but a week from now when you're going to have people or you're going to have other things you care about in that location, to put it into a scheduled environment that says, hey, I want to preload an event. Maybe it's a corporate board meeting, a regional sales meeting, whatever it might be. I don't care about the location it's being hosted in today, but as of next Monday through next Friday, I care about 2 hotels in this location and 1 conference center. And then after the event expires, we want to remove that particular asset from the map and no longer care about it. And then the business goal of the tool set is to let you define those types of risks that you care about, the proximity to the asset that you care about, and when those 2 things collide or overlap, we essentially get the alerts in the middle. So our tool set then is generating an alert mechanism to let you know that there are things now that you have that you care about that are at risk of these different types of risk events that our system's listening to. So different sources of risk, as I mentioned, today we have built into our system about 100 different sources of risk that we can visualize as it relates to a location on a map, and we can compare to distance to assets. Some of those things that are out of the box with our core bundle are certainly hurricane events, natural disasters, which can be inclusive of volcanoes and dust storms and other similar things, certainly weather on a global level. And as we've seen from recent history, terrorism, civil unrest, even other things that are less severe, but are associated with current events, disease outbreaks, hazardous material spills, traffic delays, traffic accidents, traffic congestion, aeronautics incidents. Again, there's a very long list of things that are able to be landed with the geocode, placed with a location on the map, and compared to proximity to things that you care about. And then we have a whole tool set of what we call extended sources. So this is where IDV has created connections to things like Twitter, social media, to things like operational infrastructure, maybe SCADA systems in certain types of organizations, and certainly even connecting to more of your point-based systems like your PSIMs and your access control and intrusion detection and video management, essentially giving you the ability to land these risk sources on the map in context with location. So the challenge is, typically organizations, I think, as we identified in the survey, lack a view to a complete picture, right? I don't have a consolidated position, a consolidated place to go for view to my entire operations, all those things that I care about as they're distributed and even moving across the globe. Potentially my business sits in a reactive position. I'm reacting to things, right? Some civil unrest takes place in a far-flung place on the planet that's removed from my North American operations center, but I have assets there I care about. How quickly am I getting this information? Am I reacting to things that have already taken place, or am I getting this information in a timely enough manner where I can project out to those things I care about what they need to do next to protect themselves? Right? Is my data accurate? Is it comprehensive? Is it as close to real time as I can possibly get it? Am I value confined in the environment? So again, these are all typical challenges of the environment that most of our customers face in their GSOC. And it's not uncommon. It's simply a condition of that environment today, simply based upon the fact that there hasn't been a tool set like ours to pull this whole challenge together. So the tool set enables you to take command of that environment, to put yourself in a position where you're preemptively visualizing risk against the things you care about. You're able to be both informed individually as a GSOC operator, and maybe more importantly, provide that information out to all those different parts of the business or those different parts of the GSOC operations that needs to have that visualization, that preemptive notification. And most importantly, you're helping to put the business in a proactive position. If I can see that there's a weather event, let's say a tsunami or hurricane, that's still brewing in the ocean, but it's projected over the next 3 days to hit landfall, and the projected impact plume of that event is going to overlap with 3 of my Tier 2 suppliers, 1 of my Tier 1 suppliers, 3 of my most critical distribution or supply routes, 1 of my own facilities, and 3 travelers I have in that area. And now I've got 3 days of potentially preemptive preparation. I've got myself in a better position where I'm averting typically risk, but I'm also able to potentially push out to the rest of the business a notification that says, hey, we have critical other components of our business, though not owned by our business, suppliers that could be impacted. And a disruption to suppliers potentially could mean a disruption to our company's ability to produce a product, to distribute a product, to ultimately at the end of the week, the month, the quarter, generate the revenue that potentially we as publicly traded companies are being held accountable for. So we're informed, we're proactive, we're leveraging intelligence. The information is coming to you with some validity to it, some rationale for why you're preemptively reacting to it. And again, we're reaching further into the business. It's not just about physical security, action and response. It's about disseminating information, preemptively getting information in front of the other parts of the business that can benefit from this information. So, deep value to the organization is critical and consequential.
All right, thank you, Scott. George, I think everyone's probably looking forward to hearing about the new features of 3.0, so I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Krista, and really also thanks to our audience today for your attention. Really excited to be able to present some of the new features in Visual Command Center 3, and this is really going to be the first time some of these are seen outside really our 4 walls today. So I'm going to focus primarily on version 3 features. Scott gave you a little bit of context there, but to better put it into perspective, I encourage you all to head on over at some point later on to our YouTube channel. We have our last webinar on YouTube, and so if you're interested in really seeing a demo, kind of an overview of Visual Command Center and some of the capabilities, that's a really nice one to view. Yep, that's on YouTube, and the address is right there. We've got a lot of other videos out there from other webinars too, so we hope you take advantage of that opportunity and can watch those in the near future. So Visual Command Center 3 includes a number of visible and behind-the-scenes enhancements which significantly enhance the ability to identify risk, interrogate data, and initiate action. So as we take a tour of Visual Command Center, I'll be jumping back and forth between our presentation and a live demonstration of the application. And as you heard from Scott, we're really focused on helping security operations teams deliver operational excellence to their organization. So a lot of what's new in version 3 is focused on those 4 pillars: situational awareness, risk mitigation, responsive decision making, interfunctional coordination, those kinds of things. And a case in point is the enhanced alerting in version 3, which continues to deliver the best-in-class visualization for an unlimited number of assets. And Scott talked about those different kinds of things. So we can alert on point locations, and these, as Scott said, could be buildings, but you could also alert on really anything that you can geolocate on a map. So that could be any other kind of asset, like a drill rig, a cell tower, individual employee locations, their work locations, their home locations. If you can figure out the latitude and longitude or an address, we can bring that into the system and put that on the map. You can also alert on lines or routes. Scott mentioned supply routes. Those are just one kind. So you could also have power lines, the internet backbone, pipelines, anything that you can, again, visualize sort of in a line form on a map, we can alert on those. We can also alert on areas or polygons. So these could be a campus area. This could be something else, that a jurisdiction that you're in charge of protecting, like the Panama Canal, or the area around a port that is has no-go zones or no-fly zones. So very important for a lot of folks out there in public safety, especially, to be able to protect those particular areas and get alerts when a risk event occurs in or near one of them. And of course, we also have the events, and this could be anything, again, that takes place with a beginning or ending start time, and we'll take a look at some more of those in just a second here. So Visual Command Center alerting on events. And you can think of an event like an asset that occurs in a single location but has a defined start date and possibly an end date. So for an example, operations team might want to receive alerts for risks to conventions, for large public gatherings like football games or a New Year's celebration or some kind of big conference or some kind of concert. This could be a G8 meeting. It could be a World Bank meeting, something else like that that has a lot of risk associated with it. Could be all company meetings. And you could also think of the travel stay of an individual as a kind of alert, because it's going to only be in one location. There's going to be a start date and an end date. So now that we've had a little bit of context around some of the alerting features in Visual Command Center 3, let's go ahead and take a look at what that actually looks like in new VCC 3.0. The reason we get an alert, by the way, and these are all the alerts here in our alert panel, is again because Visual Command Center has detected the proximity of an asset to a risk event. And you recall the Venn diagram we had up a few minutes ago. And with Visual Command Center 3, it's really a lot easier to visualize and get a summary of all the assets affected. And you can see we have a lot of risk events that have been brought in through all the different sources that Scott talked about. And here's an example of one. And as I roll over it, I can see it highlighted on my map. It's a severe weather statement for a severe thunderstorm. And over here on the right-hand side of our details panel, these are some of the new features that we have in version 3. We have an asset summary that immediately tells us how many buildings and employees, and if this was a mobile route, for example, a distribution route, we would also have that in the list. And we can click on the button right here, the asset button, and it's going to give us a list of all of those assets affected. So I can see I have an individual employee here, and I also have a building that's potentially threatened by that thunderstorm. And we have a lot of actionability too. I can click on these links to send an email message or phone up Linda, who's the contact there at the Ogden, Utah building. So the interesting thing about Visual Command Center 3, and this was also true of Visual Command Center 2, is that the alert details that you see here are completely contextual. And located along the bottom-hand side here, we see a menu of choices. And these are going to change depending on what type of risk event that is. So this particular risk event you'll see is a polygon area. As I roll over, you can see the shape of that. And so that's going to give me a number of different options. And one of them is I can turn that shape of the weather alert into a spatial query, and it would do something similar where it filtered out from a list of my assets the ones that are affected. If this were a point source, like a hazmat risk event or something like that, you're going to have other choices. You're going to have choices like drive time or routing options, something like that. Interestingly, also in version 3, that I think you'll appreciate is we have a lot more we can do with workflow logging of alerts. So this has really been enhanced in a number of ways. Operators can add notes to the alerts as they investigate them. And we have a little button right down here in the contextual menu, and I can go ahead and understand or share this information with other people who may be in the system. You know, thunderstorm, I'll go ahead and type a note like thunderstorm has passed. The building, that's the Ogden, sorry about that, Ogden building, all clear. As a note, for example, and I save this to my alert log, and as I go in to click in my alert log, I'm going to see that I've got some notes there around what I've just noted in the alert log. I also have a classification that I can assign to each alert, and I do that when I acknowledge the alert. And here's my choice to acknowledge this alert. And what this is going to do is it's going to clear it from the alerts panel here. And it's also going to dim that out. So as I click the Acknowledge button, I've got choices I can make as to the disposition of that event. And I can type some notes again. I could say something like all clear, or any other type of standard operating procedure or workflow that you might have in your particular organization. So that's a little bit about alerts and logging. I think more important than alerts is the ability to initiate action from the alert details and from other parts of the visual command center interface. Let me go back to a weather statement here. So visual command center is typically configured to automatically detect and send email alerts for risk events that are in proximity to assets. And there are also several manual alert capabilities as well. We have options for outbound messaging to proactively notify building, POCs, employees, travelers, or others of risk events, or the need to take action following an incident or an alert that was generated by Visual Command Center. So we have a little send message button down here on the right-hand side of our contextual menu. And when you have the send message button clicked, you'll see a window pop up, and it gives us the opportunity to select the contacts that you want to receive the message, as well as some body copy as well. In addition, I have options now available to me where I can embed a map right in the email, and I can also automatically attach an Excel report. And we call this a risk report. What the risk report does is it gives me an Excel spreadsheet summary of all the different feeds that I have turned on at the time, and it embeds a map also. So I've really got a quick report that I can share with upper management or others in the operation. And as with anything in Excel, I can perform some basic calculations in there if I want to add up how many square feet are affected, what type of revenue impacted. If I brought those details into Visual Command Center, that's going to give me a quick way to summarize that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel off of this one. Interestingly, this is all through our own Visual Command Center server-side SMPT connection. We don't need an outside email client any longer. So that you can do all of this right within Visual Command Center. You don't need to go to any kind of other email software. So in addition to the outbound emails I can manually create, again, Visual Command Center includes an enhanced email template and email architecture for those inbound alerts that we were looking at just a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and click this off, and let's go ahead and take a look at one of those email alerts that we received earlier today about some of those threatened events in Utah. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this on the screen. So again, this was the weather alert that we just received, and you'll see that I've got that summary of the weather event. It tells me where the threat is. It gives me a quick summary. It's a weather event. It gives me a copy of the map. It's telling me how many assets are nearby, how many employees are affected, the square feet, and I've also got additional context here. So it really makes it easy for recipients to understand the key facts about the potentially impacted assets, as well as their proximity to the risk event. So I'm going to know how far it is away and all the details. And we have, again, the point of contact information easily accessible. And by the way, these are all live URLs, so they're very actionable. I can just roll over one, click on the email contact, and I'm going to bring up the mail program where I can, again, send an individual message to Linda or any other person who appeared in this list. I'm going to go ahead and take that off the screen now, and let's take a minute to see how we automatically, or how we set up the automatically generated email alerts. So I'm going to go back to my presentation and share that with you on the screen here just a moment. Okay, there it is. This is the manager, what we call the manager now in Visual Command Center. In previous versions of Visual Command Center, bringing in your data and configuring your alerting options was accomplished through basically editing of XML files. And in version 3, configuration of the Visual Command Center really has been centralized into this tool. Again, the manager. The manager makes it possible for an administrator to set up the standard inbound alerting and the outbound notification and messaging we were just taking a look at. This also really simplifies configuration of the alerting by things like the type. We also have proximity we can set. We have severity, as well as the outbound messaging, again, that people would receive in the event of one of those risk events. So this also allows us to configure each data connection to have its own set of alerting logical rules if you want to set it up that way. And we do have a lot of organizations that choose to do it that way. So for example, a security operations center might want to receive alerts about any hazmat risk event within 2 miles of a company asset, but they may want alerts on any earthquake within 50 miles, and that's what the manager could do for you. So again, you can set up the logical rules depending on how your organization and your particular operating procedures are. The manager also provides a graphical interface for configuring the data connections, including new asset types and risk event sources. In the manager, you can also do map styling, filtering. You can set your tool tips. That's the little information you receive when you roll over one of the assets. And you can also set up your details here. So what's going to be shown in that details panel. Again, and you can do this all without manual editing of those XML configuration files. We make it possible to import assets here in the tool. And administrators can also define a synchronization schedule on how they want these assets to be kept up to date in the database. And as with inbound alerting, the manager makes it possible for administrators to customize the email templates and outbound messaging criteria, again, that we just looked at. And the manager is one of those features I mentioned that's sort of behind the scenes. So your SOC operators probably won't ever be working with the manager, but your administrators, maybe your developers or your IT staff members with Visual Command Center certification, they probably will. So great tool to have. I'm going to go ahead and go back to Visual Command Center now and talk about several new data connections that we have. And Scott alluded to one of these, and really that's the international SOS connection. So we can now connect with and visualize travelers and itineraries from international SOS, and I could go into my Multisearch tool and find international SOS feeds. I can look for travelers or my particular international SOS travelers, and I'm going to go ahead and see them right here, international SOS traveler data. And as I turn that on, I'm going to have in my feed panel here a list of all the travelers that are showing up in my map extents right now. Let me zoom out a little bit so that we can see those a little bit bigger and have them all on the map at one time. So Travel Tracker is really the world's most advanced travel risk management solution. It's offered by International SOS, and it was co-developed and built with IDV Solutions technology. So we're really proud of this work that we've done together. This optional data connector to Travel Tracker enables travel, security, and other departments to really have situational awareness over the organization's assets, the employees, and travelers, really wherever they may be in the world. And in Visual Command Center, you'll see real-time information from Travel Tracker showing the location of the traveler based on their itinerary. And their location appears on the map, And you can see that here and in the timeline on the lower part of the screen. And when we click on them, we can see their journey legs over here in the details panel. So you get a quick summary of their trip. And if you'd like, you can link off to Travel Tracker for additional travel risk management functions and actions. So they have a whole lot of actions built into Travel Tracker that you can take, including some notification options there too. And so you can do that all right from within Travel Tracker. So we treat travelers really just like any asset in Visual Command Center. You can use filtering, you can use the Multisearch tool, you can use spatial queries, and any of the other tools to identify the travelers you want to message or take some other action to. And so we can do that right here from our toolbar. I can go up and draw a map query. So if I'd like to select some of those employees and travelers that are in the Midwest area here, in the Great Lakes area, I can go ahead and draw a spatial query on the map. And what it did is it selected only those travelers that are located within that basically that bounding polygon, and it filtered out all the others. So now I'm only showing 11 travelers on the map. All the other ones over here are dimmed out. All the other ones around the rest of the country are dimmed out. And I focused in on these particular travelers. So again, if you wanted to take some action on these, like sending them a message, you've got tools that you can do that with, all within Visual Command Center. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my spatial query now, go back to looking at all of those travelers. We also have a new country medical risk rating and travel risk rating layers. That's part of the International SOS Travel Data Bundle. And in addition to the country ratings, control risks and International SOS's analysts are monitoring world events 24/7, 365, and they're issuing medical alerts and security alerts for critical news and events, severe weather, and evacuations that may disrupt travel or affect safety. So Visual Command Center 3 can visualize these alerts just like any other source here in the alerts panel, and that's going to allow operators to drill down into the data, again, just like any other alert that we have. So there's options for taking actions, outbound messaging, notifications, sending them an email, sending them a text, whatever your SOPs call for. Again, we're going to use those international SOS and control risks, travel alerts, and security alerts just like any other alert we're receiving in Visual Command Center. So we've continued to polish Visual Command Center data visualizations based on time, as well as the handling of time itself. So in Visual Command Center 3, operations teams have additional tools to easily interrogate risk data based on the time of occurrence. And for those of you who are familiar with Visual Command Center 2 or use it on a daily basis, you'll notice that the timeline here has changed quite a bit. Now, we retained the ability to pan and zoom the timeline, so that's zooming in and out in time, and panning, moving through time. And we have also some familiar calendar tools that can be used to set the timeline view. So I can go ahead and set start time and end times, for example, and go ahead and click OK, and that timeline is going to adjust what I see on my particular screen at that right at that moment. You can also easily switch your timeline date range with a year button, a month button, a week button, a day button, and even hourly. So I can really drill in quickly and see what's happening. And this is, again, giving me a view within right now, live as we're talking right now. And this is the new live timeline. So as we zoom in, we would actually see this. You can actually see time moving forward as we're watching it here on the screen. So I'm going to go back out to a week view and pan back a little bit here in time. It's really interesting. We really have several different ways that we can use searches, filtering, and queries. We have the spatial queries where we can draw on the map or use polygons to interrogate data. And we have the alerts, which also help us filter and understand the assets affected. Well, let's take a look at how time queries and filtering can work together with our travelers. So you may remember that last summer we had some torrential rains in Chicago, and it created some flash flooding, a lot of highway closures, and a lot of delays at O'Hare International Airport. And hopefully none of you were there in Chicago during that time, but some of you probably have a pretty vivid memory of that. let's say the flooding actually occurred last week. Since we're here in September, I can use the timeline to focus in on the time of occurrence and see who might be traveling on Friday the 13th. And so I can just go ahead and draw on the timeline, and I'm kind of just clicking and holding down the button. And basically what I'm doing is I'm selecting all those events and all those travelers, basically everything I'm seeing on the map that occurred only on Friday the 13th. I'm filtering out all the other travelers, and you can see that they have all the other travelers have dimmed on the map. And I'm also interested, really, again, since this event occurred in Chicago, I'm interested in contacting the travelers that might be traveling through O'Hare. And I can use my multi-search tool. Let's, by the way, take a look. We have 23 travelers right now that are showing as traveling on 9/13. Let's see what happens when I type in my multi-search tool. I'm going to type in Chicago. As I begin to type, actually, I don't even have to complete it. CHICAGO, and I've already filtered down my list. I've got 2 employees that are traveling through Chicago on Friday the 13th. So I've gotten all the other ones have been filtered out, and if these are, if these 2 employees are there right now, I could again use one of my various ways to get in touch with them, either sending them an email, contacting them by phone. I've got all their details right at my fingertips. Apologize for that. We're still in beta, so we have a couple of instances where we do have some errors, but we'll be releasing next week, so hopefully we'll have all those ironed out and are able to have the full functionality that we come to expect. So interestingly, the time query ranges that I'm locating here don't have to be contiguous. So if you want to analyze incidents on particular days of the week or month, you can do that too. And as I set up a time-based query, you can also choose to play back the incidents. So I can see my travelers on the map and on the timeline as they occur. And let's go ahead and click the playback button. And you may have a hard time seeing this all on your screen as the animation might not be completely coming through on the webinar. But what's happening is it's moving through these events and highlighting those as they occur on each particular date. And like the heat map tool, really this is a great tool for visualizing and an incident or understanding other patterns that your risk and security data may have, and allows you to, again, preemptively and proactively in the future deal with those types of events. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off that time query. Visual Command Center also has options for visualizing data and managing time when an event occurs in a time zone that's different from that of the operator. So this is something new in version 3.0. Let's say, since we've been talking about Chicago, that your operator has responsibility for Chicago but is sitting in Atlanta. He or she can choose their Visual Command Center operations time here in the toolbar. So I can go to the toolbar and select my time zone, and all the logs and all the time stamp features that we were just showing you in some of those alerts, those are all going to reflect the time that we select here. We also have the ability to show a new day-night feature. So this is a shadow that gives us an idea of where in the world it's daytime and where it's nighttime. So this is all based on an algorithm and updated in real time. So if we got really close to the ground, we'd actually see the shadow march across the ground. But the shadow again tells us that right now Italy is probably near sunset, and it's getting dark in some of the eastern parts of Europe. So again, it helps us really to understand the conditions for areas that some of our SOC agents might be monitoring. And again, you can just turn that on and off at will here in the toolbar. So let's stay with the toolbar here for a moment. Visual Command Center's favorite views and slideshow options are really popular with operations teams because of their contribution to situational awareness. Basically, what a favorite does is it remembers our current view and all the view settings associated. So what's is the alert panel showing, what's showing on the feed control panel, whether the timeline is on or not, the map style, is it road, is it hybrid, is it aerial, the grid lines or scales, how far we're zoomed, the actual location or center point of the map, the day-night shadow, all of these things we've just looked at. And this has been enhanced in Visual Command Center 3 again, to really help teams that are tasked with monitoring multiple locations or regions. And favorite views now are respecting users' permission levels, so I can choose to show these favorites to various parts of my organization, and we can do some basic security trimming with the favorites. So if you have authorization, you can see some of these views. Other people won't even see them. And they'll also only see the data that they're authorized to see. So if that's a particular permission, they may or may not see details in the details panel there. And again, as with Visual Command Center, some of the earlier versions, these favorite views can be made available. You can share these by creating a URL and emailing that URL. We can also assign tags to each favorite, and I've done that with a few here. So Algeria drilling site, for example, and this really gives an operator a chance to go down to the find favorites. If I want to see all of the favorites with operations in it, I just start to type, and I'm going to see operations that are tagged or in the title of any of those favorites. So again, really helpful to instantly locate one or more of those views in a large set of favorites. Also, we have a new feature in Visual Command Center 3. This is the favorites tours. This really replaces the favorites slideshow. And favorites tours, we can set up multiple favorites tours, and these can be created to cycle through individual favorite views in any order that the user defines. So you really can enhance your situational awareness in your SOC by setting up a selection of these views to be displayed in rotation, for example, on one or more of your big screens. And as you can see here, I just drag these over, and I can reorder them. And then hopefully you can see that out there as I'm moving this around. You'll see those jump around. I can go back and forth between views, so I can have multiple views of the same view in my tour. So I can, again, sort of repeat the frequency of some of those more important ones. And I can go ahead and then launch the tour, and it's going to start scrolling through all of those different favorites views that I set up and included in my favorites tour. And as we wait, you'll see up here on the upper part of your screen, I've set it for every 10 seconds, and I can actually jump from favorite to favorite that I've set up in that favorite tour via these little buttons at the top. So right now it's scrolling through all the tours I included, or all the different views, favorite views I included in that tour. So again, I can get a big picture. This was the macro view that Scott was talking about. I can go down to regional views. I can look at my supply chain operations in the context of all the routes I have. These are all my distribution routes. Or I can go all the way down to a very metro view, like a city somewhere in the world that I may have particular interest in. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of my favorites tour just by clicking on the screen. And let's take a look at a tool that we developed based on feedback from operations teams. We heard that they'd like to see an asset or other information without having to roll the mouse or tooltip over that asset. So they want to know what's the name of this asset. We have a new feature here called Label Preferences, and this really gives us the opportunity to easily turn on labels on the map. So any of those feeds that you saw over on the right-hand side, we can click them individually and go and assign what it is that we're going to show on the map, whether it's the title or details. We can change the font, the size, we can vary the color, we can make them bold, italic, and we also have some preferences over here on the right. When you get into things like overlapping assets, which one do you show? Is this one the most important one, or should this one be in the background? We can set these individually or in groups, and all we have to do is turn them on, and as soon as I change one of those, it's going to show on the map. And here are a couple of examples. It gives you an example as you're setting up this wall change live, so that I can see what it looks like on a road view, what it looks like on an aerial view with different text colors. Really allows me to dial in what it should look like, again, so my operators can easily see and identify, for example, the buildings or drilling sites or distribution routes that we might have. So that's the new labels tool, and that's going to wrap it up for some of the new features in Visual Command Center 3. And I'm going to send it back over to Krista now. I know Krista's got some answers coming in, or some questions coming in. Sorry about that. And we'll be getting to those in just a minute. So Krista? back to you.
All right, George, thank you. For those of you that have questions, remember that you can enter them now via your go-to webinar control panel, and we'll answer them in just a few minutes. And while we're waiting for everyone to submit those questions, Scott, I was just wondering, could you bring all this together for us and summarize what a security operations team might see in terms of operational and business benefits of Visual Command Center?
Yep, thanks, Krista. We'll try to do this quickly, so we'll move through those slides. So yeah, so essentially, the thing to keep in mind is this tool, with all its really powerful features and functionalities, and the assets that can be plotted on the map, and certainly the risk sources that can be brought in, the correlation and the alerting, is that ultimately, at the end of the day, the end of the week, month, the quarter, this tool set brings a significant business value to the organization. So you're helping to do things like drive a business case, operational excellence, putting a tool set in place that provides true global situational awareness, putting a tool set in place that gives you that preemptive visualization to risk against the things you care about, and hopefully giving you the ability to mitigate the risk against those things that you care about and you're responsible for managing. Putting a responsive decision-making process with a tool set in place. And then, might be bigger than this, but not uncommon in most of our customer deployments, is that this becomes very multi-departmental, interfunctional, as it relates to both the value proposition that it's delivering as well as the coordination and the end results that it's driving for the organization. So understand, significant business case, significant operational excellence. And again, to maybe put a finer point on that business case, the other thing that makes this a very attractive tool set for the organization, besides the business benefits, is the ability for a tool set like this to defend what you might call business operations return on investment, right? So there's a number of places we're able to build business case for customers to help them, defend and go after the funding for a tool set like this. Certainly, as you start to aggregate disparate process, disparate resources, as you start to push out the cost of certain types of capital that you might have been investing in over time, you can mitigate that cost, you can avoid it. As you're increasing the operational efficiencies, and enhancing things like compliance, putting your business in a proactive and a forward position, you're driving bottom line, defendable business case ROI, which within many of our customer organizations was either the posture that was taking up front or was the end result of the deployment of our solution.
It looks like we have time for a few questions. All right, so for the first question, with the new alerting functionality, does this mean that I can land some of my own sources of risk into the Visual Command Center and configure alerting when near my assets? Scott, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So right, with the new configuration tools that are essentially enabling the business user to take control of some of those things that they want to have daily control of on a frequent basis, you have the ability now to not only leverage the sources that we're bringing into the system, but you can go out and find your own, geo-coded sources of risk. You can bring them into our engine. They can be landed, geospatially onto the map, and then alerted against those things that you care about, your assets. So again, configurable by the end user. Certainly, the ability to choose and pick and find some of your own risk sources and aggregate those all within Visual Command Center 3.0.
All right, thank you, Scott. The next question is SharePoint 2013 supported? George, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. SharePoint 2013, I'm not sure how many of you noticed, but as I was giving the demonstration of the 3.0 features, you would have seen the Sharepoint Ribbon across the top. I didn't get a chance to talk much about that during the demonstration, but we have a new tool that minimizes that Sharepoint Ribbon. It gives you a little bit more real estate for Visual Command Center. So that's a really nice feature that we've been able to, again, use SharePoint 2013 for. So all of that is native 2013. If you're using an earlier version, we do support some of the earlier versions of SharePoint as well.
All right. Thank you, George. Our next question is, did I understand that Visual Command Center accurately in that you can visualize travelers out of International SOS Travel Tracker historically, presently, and in the future? And can you explain why I would want to know where my travelers have been or are going in the future? Scott, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Really good question. So yeah, with the connection that we have to the International SOS Travel Tracker service, we have the ability to land a traveler in both their current location, so where the itinerary says they are today, in their historical perspective, so we can keep some information about where a traveler has been up to a certain duration of time, typically identified and defined by the customer, and then also we can track travelers in their future destinations. So the reason you'd want to do that, and I think almost everybody out there understands this, is that if you have an incident, for example, like a disease outbreak or something similar, that you're notified about today, that takes place in a part of the country, let's say, over time, and you want to find out how many people have I had in the vicinity of this particular disease outbreak, let's say in some part of, of China. Using the historical traveler information, the ability to visualize on the map, you can go in, create those polygon shapes, define a distance that you would care about your assets being in. If you turn on the layer of historical travelers, then you're able to identify, did you have any travelers over the last 7, 10, 12, 14 days that might have been in this area that potentially could have been exposed to this particular, outbreak. And certainly historically, the goal is that if you know where you're going to have travelers in the future, you're able to more preemptively notify the business of when travelers might be at risk. So, you wouldn't want to send a traveler, tomorrow or 2 days from now into a future impact plume of a tsunami in the Far East. Similar to sending them into some location like, the most recent location, the G8 conference. Let's say you have an office or you have, employees doing business in an area that's potentially going to be shut down due to protests and so forth. Again, very significant value in having that foresight into where your travelers are going to be so that you can preempt them. You can let them know, we recommend not going there, or that if you're going there, here's some of the conditions that you're going to have to deal with, so here's how we recommend dealing with those conditions.
All right, George, here's another one that you'll be able to answer for us. How many assets can Visual Command Center 3.0 alert on?
So the answer is it's really unlimited. Whatever you can bring in to Visual Command Center, and those are, again, some of the things I talked about earlier, whether it's a point source like a building or a cell phone tower or areas or jurisdictions or lines, or even the events that occur in time and temporary events. You can really have an unlimited number of those, and Visual Command Center will create an alert whenever it detects one of those risk sources in proximity to the alert. It's unlimited.
All right, thank you, George. It looks like we are about out of time. If we weren't able to get to your question, remember that you can email those to us individually, and we will respond to those. For more information, we have included our contact information on the screen, and there's a recording of the webinar that will be available within about 48 hours and located on our YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar presented by IDV Solutions. Scott and George, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and to all of the attendees for the webinar, thank you again, and have a great day.